Tomorrow, the January 6th committee will hold its third public hearing, and this comes as the panel focuses on how former President Trump spread false claims about election fraud rather than accept his 2020 presidential loss. Trump issued a statement after the committee's second hearing yesterday, calling it a, quote, smoke and mirror show. Our congressional correspondent Nikole Killion has been covering this investigation since the beginning and is joining us now from Capitol Hill. So, Nikole, yesterday, one of the assertions of the panel is that the president knew that the big lie was in fact a big lie, that he had lost the election and there was no fraud. And sort of some of what we heard yesterday from the panel is building that argument. The many, many people who repeated to him over and over again that it looks like you lost the election. Maybe you should accept that. What new information did we learn during the second hearing, and what did we learn about Trump's former lawyer, Rudy Giuliani?
Yeah, well, to your point, I mean, that really was the main takeaway, that, the former president was told multiple times in multiple ways by multiple people that his fraudulent election claims were baseless, and just that, fraudulent, and, that the former president didn't really listen to any of that, whether it was, coming from his family, whether it was coming from campaign aides, whether it was coming from people inside of his own administration, like the former Attorney General Bill Barr. So, this really comes down to the former president, in essence, kind of changing course on election night, because then, his former campaign manager, Bill Stepien, who testified, said that he advised the president not to declare victory, that, it was too early to try to call the race, that he should hold off. And yet we saw that night that the former president went out anyway, saying, frankly, we won this election. And so some of that comes down to, according to campaign aides, a conversation that the former president had with his then attorney, Rudy Giuliani, who some campaign aides allege was intoxicated, although Rudy Giuliani's attorney told CBS News that he was not drunk election night, and, that this was something that the committee didn't ask Giuliani about when he testified before the panel for a number of hours. So, that being said, what we saw basically after election night was kind of this unspooling, if you will, of the former president, who kind of continued to push this false narrative that the election was stolen, that it was rigged, and then kind of aligning himself more with Rudy Giuliani and kind of this fringe group of legal experts, if you even want to call them that, who, kind of propagated these false claims on his behalf, whether it was dead people voting, whether it was, ballots stuffed with in suitcases that had gone missing, or ballots dumped in garbage cans, and we saw from all of these various campaign and election experts who testified before the panel yesterday that all of that, in essence, was debunked.
Yeah, and I think sort of the quote that's being repeated over and over again is coming from former Attorney General Bill Barr, who very matter-of-factly in his testimony under oath said it appeared that the president was, quote, detached from reality. I'm assuming that he wasn't being hyperbolic because he was under oath. And that was sort of the first section of the hearing. And then the committee starts to talk about fundraising and alleging that the Trump's campaign raised millions of dollars off false claims of election fraud. And not just raised the money off those false claims, but used it in a way that perhaps the donors may not have expected. So now the question is, could Trump face legal repercussions for this?
Well, I think that's the big question here, right? In terms of the committee standpoint, their view is that they're simply laying out the facts, and people can draw whatever conclusions they may, including the Justice Department. But they did seem to suggest or indicate that there could have been some potential wrongdoing there. Ultimately, again, this is going to be a decision that will be up to federal prosecutors, the Justice Department, should they decide, excuse me, to pursue a further course of action. And what's interesting is there is a little bit of daylight between the panel over whether or not they should ultimately issue a criminal referral against the former president. So that is something to watch going forward. But either way, the committee feels that it is putting out this evidence. And even just yesterday, we heard from the Attorney General saying that he and January 6 prosecutors are watching these hearings.
And they're not the only ones. Nikole, thank you very much. We're watching closely as well. So here for analysis on the second January 6th hearing is our chief election and campaign correspondent, Robert Costa. Robert, thanks for joining us. How did yesterday's hearing fit into the overall narrative that the committee is trying to present to the American people?
Great to be with you. The committee was trying to bring the American people back to this moment, the days after the 2020 election, November 2020. And it's so evident based on this testimony and reporting from CBS News and others that then President Trump made a decision to embrace the ideas and conspiracies of people like Rudy Giuliani and outside attorney Sidney Powell, and to ignore his own attorney general, Bill Barr, ignore his campaign manager, Bill Stepien, and move toward overturning the 2020 election.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and the question I think a lot of people ask. When you see one Republican after another, people who were in the room, someone like Bill Barr who says, yeah, it occurred to me that, loosely, but the phrase was that he's becoming detached from reality. That's pretty severe, except that's not the messaging that the American people got at the time, and certainly not the people who went running into the Capitol building. What do some of these people say about why they didn't speak up at the time?
It's so revealing that we're learning a lot more only because subpoenas were issued to people who were in then President Trump's inner circle. There have been books written, articles written, television reports, almost ad nauseum since 2020 about this period. But we're learning more because now, as you have said, these people are testifying under oath. And it raises the question, as you rightly raised it, why did they not speak up earlier when they knew that the president was choosing to go down a path that wasn't based on evidence, that wasn't based on the truth? And part of the answer, based on my own conversations with top Republicans, is they believed then and they believed now that then President Trump, now former President Trump, has a lot of political capital. Now, some people may not view that as a legitimate excuse, and I'm not here to argue with them in any way. But it's clear that inside the Republican Party, then and now, people don't want to fight with Trump, knowing he might run again, knowing he could fight them publicly.
Really quickly, we know that the committee is trying to draw a straight line between what happened on January 6th and the president. But to me, they took a mild detour. Maybe it's not a detour. They also talked yesterday about the amount of money that was raised based on this lie that they are arguing the president knew was a lie. Some of that money went to, I don't know, like fees for speeches and stuff like that. Why was it important to make that connection?
To understand a story that might end with a criminal referral, it might not, you need to understand the motive. And it's clear that the president and his allies wanted to stay in power. That was part of their motivation. But what the committee is arguing is that money played a role, perhaps a significant role. That was fueling so much of this effort to keep fighting in the courts, to keep fighting all the way through January 2021.
So the committee is arguing it's not that he was just sort of ignoring the facts for ignoring sake. The committee is arguing that maybe there was a financial gain. There was a reason why one would be motivated to ignore the facts. Robert, thank you very much. Look forward to talking to you as the hearings unfold.
Thank you.